Hello, I'm Phelan McAleer.
And I'm Anne McElhinney.
And welcome to the Anne Phelan Scoop. We are aware that it's Thanksgiving where you are. We're in Israel, a people and a country at war. We're here interviewing people directly affected by October 7th. We'll bring you the latest on that in this show. We've just arrived. We've literally just arrived. And as I say, it's Thanksgiving where you are. And, you know,
yeah, before we start, we want to thank you actually for making all of this possible, and for all the work that we do, telling unreported stories. This one couldn't be more important.
Yes.
And if you wanted to help us, please do donate at unreportedstorysociety.com, unreportedstorysociety.com. So yeah, we're here.
Yes, the world is crazy at the moment, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. And a lot of unreported stories. Actually, that's not even misinformation. It's the stories that are being forgotten, and we're going to make sure they're not forgotten. So please, unreportedstorysociety.com, you want to help in that process. Also on the show, before we left, we interviewed our good friend and colleague Marc Aramian about his new movie, a pro-life movie, and we'll tell you how you can help get it made. So Anne, we're in Israel.
We are, and we, even when we started to, prepare to leave, as we were leaving on our trip here, you started to know quite early on that something was very different afoot. Something was very, very much amiss. We didn't get a direct flight. We flew through Boston, and at Boston Airport, everything was different. Nothing about this flight was like what you'd expect. You couldn't get the tickets in advance. We couldn't get the plane ticket. Had to be issued in person at the airport in Boston, and we had to line up and speak to one man. Then we got the ticket. Then we had to line up once more, and that was the really important one, because that's where we got quite a detailed interrogation about who we were, where we were from, what we were doing, why we were going, about our past, about what we did for a living, and I suppose it makes a lot of sense. By the way,
Yes.
this is a war zone after all, and so they were taking all kinds of precautions. Then we get on the plane, and again, another thing that immediately I just took a note to remember the words. We heard this phrase used a number of times. The pilot said, "We stand in solidarity with the people of Israel and the armed forces, and we wish for better days." The air hostess said the same thing a number of times in different ways, but we wish for better days, and we certainly wish for better days for people here.
And even on the TV screen, as you watched the shows, there was this phrase was there. There was the Israeli flag everywhere. We arrived at the airport. The airport was so quiet. I don't think I've ever been in as quiet an airport. We went through passport control like that because it was just so quiet.
But the first thing that struck us when we got to the airport was just when we come off the plane, there was one of the moving walkways. We're going to show that piece of video now, where they had, and those particular pictures of the kidnapped were not torn down, which is reassuring. But I was just filming that, and you'll see as we come along. Halfway along there, you see this child sitting, a young girl sitting, wearing the same colour T-shirt as the woman in the picture. I didn't stop. I didn't think it was appropriate to stop and ask the girl, what her intentions were. But I was able to very easily, and you can very easily look up who this woman was, the woman who is kidnapped, who is Shoshana Haran, presumed Shoshan Haran, who's presumed captive, who has dedicated her life to helping farmers in Africa.
She's a hostage in Gaza now.
And she's the founder of an organisation called Fair Planet. She was based in Kibbutz Be'eri, which I think was one of the hardest hit, and apparently described as the most socialist, sort of the socialist utopia. So she founded Fair Planet, and the T-shirt you can see her wearing in the poster there. The person who's sitting there, the young girl who's sitting there, is wearing the same T-shirt with Fair Planet. As I said, I don't know who she is, but I think probably there's a very good chance that she's a relative. So just on that, just to mention one thing about Shoshan Haran, she was kidnapped along with some 200 other civilians by Hamas, and this is from the Times of Israel. The terrorists detonated a bomb in her home with explosives after abducting Shoshan and 9 other members of her family. So 9 members of that family have been abducted. So we'll be obviously watching and following up with that and seeing what's happening there. But everywhere, so once we arrived in the city...
I mean, actually, I just want to say that, you know, that's the probably the irony of all this is that many of the people they abducted would have probably been the Palestinians'
best friends,
most ardent, not supporters,
yeah,
but definitely would have been on the lookout for them more so than many others, you know. So they've abducted and are holding hostage some of those who would have been most, let's say, sympathetic, possibly,
yes,
to the Palestinians. So
the taxi driver that took us in, you know, I mean, this is kind of the experience you have here, that anyone you speak to will has a story. He has one son. He told us, like, he has one child. I have one son. It's very, very hard. His son is working with the Iron Dome people, so, you know, and he was sort of saying, hoping that he would see his son that day, and very worried about his son's safety. As I said, in the one of the biggest things that struck me the minute you arrive, even at the airport, is signs for bomb shelters. There's signs for everywhere you go. There's signs and there's also, instead of people telling you where the exits are, everyone's telling you where the nearest bomb shelter is. And so we come into the hotel, and the hotel has on every floor indications where the bomb shelter is, and the people at the hotel, who are very kind, you know, constantly telling you where the bomb shelter was, how much time you have, if you hear a siren, how much time you have. And of course, then bizarrely, of course, what happens is we arrive, we're completely destroyed with jet lag, so we decide to have a nap. I'm woken up by the sound of sirens on the very first evening we arrived, and almost immediately followed by a bunch of rockets. And I went immediately on Twitter rather than jumping out of bed and going to the shelter,
yes,
and saw that in fact there had been a volley of rockets fired from Gaza into Tel Aviv. But
so it's important, I think, that if you do hear sirens, and you wake up, don't sort of go on Twitter. And in future, we should actually go to the bomb shelter.
I did try to.
But you could hear the rockets exploding in the air above Tel Aviv. The Iron Dome did its job, but it doesn't always do its job. So I think going forward,
yes,
no matter how jet lagged we are,
yes,
we should possibly go to the shelter.
We should have moved a bit quicker.
Yes.
Also, just to say again, everywhere there are signs of what happened. Everywhere there are signs of October 7th. In the foyer of the hotel, this is a very small hotel we're staying in. In the foyer of the hotel, there is a small memorial with candles. You can see it there. I've just got a little bit of footage of that. This young woman who is a member of the staff, a beloved member of the staff here at this hotel, who was murdered. She was at the Nova Festival and she was murdered. And you can see the photographs, beautiful photographs of this young woman there. And every day we see them lighting the candles in front of the memorial and remembering her. So, and then kind of bizarrely, you know, we arrived on Shabbat evening. We went out in the evening. And then bizarrely, the restaurants are full and people are trying to live a normal life.
Yes.
But at every time you look at people, they are trying to have a normal life, but people are just haunted, yes, traumatized. There's trauma.
There's
everywhere.
Trauma. I would call this country a trauma. But you know, it's an amazing country too, because there beside the beach was what I think was, you know. And this is the thing you won't see anywhere else in this region, was a pro-ceasefire, I imagine, demonstration. You know, obviously it was all in Hebrew, but there was several hundred people, maybe 1,000 people, and all I could hear was shalom, 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 which is peace. And I worked out that they were pro-ceasefire or sympathetic to Palestine, you know, whatever they were, because there was a guy beside them with a bullhorn protesting them, and they were giving each other rude signs. And the guy beside them, all I could hear was him going, Hebrew, 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 and he'd go, Hamas, and then he'd go, Hebrew, Hebrew, proportionality. And then I loved the other insult, BBC. You know, BBC was the worst insult he could throw at them. So BBC, Hamas, BBC, and proportionality were the 3 words I picked up. So I assumed that he was attacking them. And then nearby there was a counter protest of the Israeli group holding pictures of some of the kidnapped and singing the national anthem and singing patriotic.
And you can see, I'm going to show a little bit of footage there of that. Actually, a lot of the people in this counter protest had signs up for Jonathan Semrano. Jonathan Semrano, who I've again looked up, 21 years old, who has been kidnapped. and who is described as the life and soul of the party, basically the life and soul of the party. A lot of people have pictures of him, and we're gonna let this roll a little bit. People can watch this. The song that's being sung there is as many of you will know, is the Israeli national anthem. And I probably won't say the name right, but obviously the English translation is the word hope.
It's Hatikva. But please correct our pronunciation, by the way, in the...
Hatikva, and the translation is hope.
Please correct our pronunciations in the comments on YouTube, if you please. We would appreciate that, actually.
So Jonathan Samarano, who hasn't been heard of since 7 a.m. on October 7th. So again, another name that we'll be watching out for and finding out more about.
So as I say, we've just arrived, and we've interviewed one person so far about October 7th. It's a horror story. It's a James Bond story. It's a story of a miraculous escape. It's an amazing story. We're going to be interviewing a lot more people for the project we're doing. We're not as the world is moving at the moment. The world is moving away from moving on from October 7. In fact, we would argue they never really stopped for October 7, and that the minute it happened, there were either celebrations or calls for a ceasefire right away. There was no in the West. There was no acknowledgement that Israel had been through a trauma Israel had suffered in 9/11. It went straight to, we have got to have a ceasefire, or we got or there were celebrations, or sometimes both at the same rally. So, and then there was the anti-Israeli protests in campuses and cities across the West. So, and at the moment we're hearing a lot about Gaza, we're hearing a lot about proportionality and genocide, and no doubt you'll continue to hear a lot about that. But we at the Unreported Story Society, we're going to bring you those October 7 stories, right? That's what we're going to focus on, and make sure everyone knows and that no one forgets that day, because you can only make sense of what is going on now. I think Israeli society changed from October 6th to October 8th. So you can only make sense of what's happening now
if you know what happened.
If you know what happened on October 7th.
And I think there's also a quote, I think it might be from Elie Wiesel, but people can correct me, where they said, if you forget the dead, it's like they died twice. Which I think it's a really powerful thing. People need to be remembered. And all these young people, I mean, the pictures are extraordinary. When you think of the kind of people, particularly the ones that were at the Nova Festival, they were all peace lovers, kind of high on drugs and dancing and extremely happy with themselves. And their whole world was completely turned upside down. And for some of them, it was the end of their world. But we will remember, and that's what we're here to do, is to hear those stories and find out what happened, and memorialise what happened.
So yes, as we said before we left America, we interviewed Marc, our colleague, friend and colleague Marc Aramian, about his new project. He named him Adam. We'll go over to that interview now. This was recorded before we left America. It's a great project, and it's important that you help get this project made by going to henamedhimadam.com. Let's go over to that interview now and hear what Marc and his partner Victoria have to say.
So for a really special interview today, as I was saying, you're going to meet someone who makes us sound wonderful, who makes us, I know you think we're wonderful, but actually a lot of it is the work of people like Marc and his wife, Veronica. They're a wonderful couple. Marc is the genius who mixed and scored our Kevin Spacey podcast, which you should listen to if you haven't already, the Kevin Spacey Trial, Unfiltered. So many people, if you look in the comments, so many people have written and said, it sounds so professional, it sounds so wonderful. And we're going, it does, because Marc Aramian, he did the sound on it. He did the sound editing. And it's wrong to call it even sound editing. It's sound production, or maybe
design.
Design, that's the word.
I think it's called sound design,
Well, he could tell us that, actually.
Yes.
And the reason we have them on this week is they've launched a crowdfunding campaign for their new movie. He named him Adam. Adam is an abortion story, so very, very close to our hearts, and it's interesting that all these movies are being made. So if you want to tackle this subject in a way that Hollywood wouldn't, you got to support these people. But we wanted to bring them on to tell us about the project and to tell us why they're making it. So welcome to the show, Marc and Veronica.
Thank you for having us.
Great to be here.
Well, it's great to see you guys. Can you start by tell us about this project and how did you hear about this story?
So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the project. It's called He Named Him Adam, and it is a true life story of a woman named Regina Block. And she's a woman who had an abortion and immediately suffered from post-abortive stress disorder. She suffered from this for 9 years, crippling depression, and brought up to the point of suicide. It was one day when she was driving down the road, passing the abortion clinic, when she became so overwhelmed that she almost ran into an oncoming truck. What saved her was a voice from the back seat of her 4-year-old daughter, who Regina had forgot was even there. And the words that her daughter said changed Regina's life. And they were, and I quote, "Mommy, I had a dream about my brother." So this little girl had been having a series of recurring dreams about meeting an 8-year-old brother in heaven. And you understand, this girl had no way of knowing that her mother had had a previous pregnancy, let alone had an abortion. The details of this dream were so powerful and transformative for Regina that she describes it as a glimpse of God's grace, mercy, and forgiveness. So this changed her life. It turned it totally around. She never had another suicidal inclination. She joined a post-abortive therapy group. She volunteered at a pro-life pregnancy clinic, and she is now the director of the National Memorial for the Unborn, which is a memorial building in Chattanooga, Tennessee, that was created on the very site of a former abortion clinic. And it's a place where people can come from around the country and even around the world, in person or virtually. And people who have come to regret their abortions, it's a place where they can come and they can honor their unborn children lost to abortion.
So why a movie? I mean, why tell it this way? Why not a documentary or
Or a book or yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. We're in a culture war. And I know you guys know this because you're on the front lines. But a lot of people don't realize that while the right is making these intellectual arguments, calling on science and logic, the progressive left is telling stories. They're tugging at people's heartstrings. It's an emotional argument. And the thing is, they're winning because that works. So, what is the best way if we're going to try to make a pro-life argument? The best way to change people's hearts, after which their minds will change, is to make a movie. And movies are simply the most powerful way to do that. And Hollywood knows it, and they've been beating us up with it.
And of course, you guys know this from all your experience with movies like Gosnell. You know that you changed people's minds by changing their hearts. They had an emotional reaction to that film. They had no idea this was going on, and it changed people's perspectives.
Totally. I mean, we can attest to that. We can attest that Gosnell changed people's minds. I think this story will change people's minds. I mean, you've got a long experience in the entertainment industry. So, Mark, what is a sound designer? And are you a sound designer?
And a composer.
That's my side job. Yeah. So I create aural, AURAL, environments that tell a story. And basically, if I'm working for you, I'm trying to tell your story in a way that you actually can control people's emotions. I mean, I paint with emotions when I score or sound design a story, and you can accomplish a lot of that yourself by the words, but music is visceral. It has a visceral effect. It goes directly to the amygdala when you hear something, and it triggers an emotion. And that's my job, is to trigger those emotions so that your story is told.
Did you write the music for this movie, Mark?
I will. I mean, when we make it, the Father Ryan one is an example of my film scoring.
Right. So when I cut the Father Ryan movie together, there were certain emotions visually that I created, but I knew that Mark was going to be able to create the sound and the music scape that was going to be able to allow those emotions to come to full fruition. And they did. They worked.
Yeah, I agree. If people haven't seen it, it's on YouTube, isn't it, Mark? Or where can they get Father Ryan a higher call?
If they go to our website, he named him Adam.com or crunchentertainment.com, there are links then to the Father Ryan movie, and it's a YouTube.
People want to see the standard of Mark and Veronica's work. Just go to thenamedhimadam.com. You can donate there as well, but you'll see the Father Ryan story. It's a very moving story, and it's told brilliantly. And as you say, the sound and music just adds so many depths to it, so much depth to it. I mean, I've watched your video about how about you're now fundraising, you're now trying to raise money, you're crowdfunding. When did the campaign? How long has the campaign been going now?
About a week, I think.
Yeah, about a week. Yeah. And this is the first time for us. So thank you for your tutorial on crowdfunding.
You guys paved the way.
We really appreciated that. We're trying to follow you down this rocky path. And so we're kind of learning as we go. But we're very encouraged because we've gotten a tremendous response from people who know that this movie needs to be made and are very excited about this movie. So, for example, we did a podcast previous to this, and we've been invited to speak tonight at a Knights of Columbus meeting, and we're starting to get responses from people who want us to come and speak and talk to them about the project.
How much are you trying to raise for this movie?
$500,000.
Right. Okay. Well,
Okay.
it's as I think Phelan probably said to you. I mean, it's obviously it's very challenging, but it's very worthwhile.
Yes.
But it's hard work. It's definitely hard work, and nobody can do it but yourselves. But because we obviously have a very long history of doing crowdfunding, and Magda had a way of describing it. You know, it was basically every day was a nightmare. So I hope it's less of a nightmare for you. How did you come across this story in the first place?
So we were at a March for Life a couple of years ago, and we just whipped out a camera and started shooting interviews with people like, why are you here? Put it together, a little 3-minute thing, and gave it to them so they could use to promote their the Chattanooga Right to Life chapter. And Regina was one of the people there talking, and she told this story about this fantastical event. And we talked to her afterwards and just fell in love with her. And, we wanted to tell this story because we feel like this story will appeal to a group of people who are intransigent in the abortion debate. The women who have had abortions but haven't reconciled, who haven't repented, are going to keep voting for abortion. You're talking about 20 million people. This could flip the 50-50 split in this country and make pro-life the dominant gestalt. Is that the right word?
Something like that.
I mean, and I think it's very important because, as we've seen, it wasn't all about overturning Roe v. Wade. There's obviously a lot of work to be done on the pro-life side to changing hearts and minds. In fact, that's the only work that's been done now. Legislatively, it doesn't seem to be working in so many states. So you need stories, you need human stories, you need a human emotion to flip that. So tell us where people can go.
Yeah, so he named him Adam.com. It's all one word. www.henamedhimadam.com.
And then they go there and they get perks as well. So it's not just you're not just looking for donations. You get rewards too. Tell us about some of the rewards that one can get for giving a kind donation.
Well, the smallest donations entitled people to stream the movie once it's released. A little bit more donation allows the people to get a sneak preview of it. We'll have T-shirts, posters, signed scripts, autograph scripts, and so on.
Yeah, I believe you can have a part in the movie as well. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah, walk-on parts for $5,000, a small speaking role for $10,000.
We have a very funny story about we had that as a perk. We had a speaking role for somebody, and I sometimes ask people what could possibly go wrong, and it was $10,000. It's a lot of money for a very short speaking role. So we go out to meet the man, and and meet him, and a very handsome person, and which is like great because that's looking nice in the movie, whatever line he's going to have. And then he opens his mouth and he has the strongest accent you have ever heard, and it's not American anything, it's some kind of Liechtenstein accent, and it was one of those, it was like a classic. And Magda and myself and Phelan were there standing in front of this man thinking, oh my god, what do we do here? And actually we came up with a very good solution, which if this happens to you, we have the solution as well. The man is in the film and he whispers. And when you whisper, it's not as pronounced. So he has a whispering role, and actually turned out to be a total rock star and a fabulous person. But it was one of those kind of funny things that happen, and you'll find funny things will happen along the way. Funny things will happen, but also really, really good things are going to happen. And we've met people that donated to us, people that just turned up out of nowhere and was like, wow, who are still our friends today. So I just think once you get involved with this kind of content, people turn up. People really turn up to support.
So Mark and Veronica are great storytellers. They're great filmmakers. Please go to henamedhim.com and give what you can, and get your friends to give what you can, and send the link to your friends, because we need more movies to be made like this.
Yes, not less.
Not less.
And also, please, for a perk that I'd like to offer, I'm going to need Anne's meatloaf recipe.
Oh, very good. Oh, yeah. That also was a mistake. It wasn't actually, because I can't remember how much I charged for the meatloaf. But
$3,000.
Oh, maybe $3,000. But one of the first people to take the meatloaf was somebody who interviewed us.
Mike
Gallagher in New
Salem,
York,
yeah.
Salem radio host. And he's in the interview and he's saying, and you've got these perks. I'm just looking through the perks. Oh my God, meatloaf. I'm totally going to get that. And of course, it all sounds very well until you then realize, how do you transport that? But actually, by the way, we did do that with, what's that stuff called?
Oh, dry ice.
Dry ice or whatever. But yeah, it's amazing the things that will inspire people. So I think unusual perks are worthwhile, even if they are expensive to execute.
Is there anything you want to tell people before we go?
Black Friday is coming up, so instead of buying that funky sweater or something that's going to be regifted or something you really don't need, please consider donating to this project.
That's great. I love it. That's a great idea. That's a great line. Okay.
Well, thank you guys.
Thank you guys. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you so much.
Happy Thanksgiving. Bye.
Okay, same to you too.
So it's henamedhimadam.com. henamedhimadam.com. Please help. Please give what you can. Also, if you'd like to support our efforts telling the untold story, go to unreportedstoriesociety.com. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
So but the next time we speak to you, we're traveling all over the country here in Israel to speak to people, to hear their stories, to memorialize what's happened. And we'll be bringing you a very significant project about this coming up in the new year. But right now, this is what we're doing, is collecting these stories. Very, very important that they are remembered. And if you want to remember us, we would be so grateful. Obviously, we're employing a lot of people here to help us on the ground with translators and drivers and all that kind of stuff. So any help that you can give would be most appreciated by us, particularly at Thanksgiving.
Okay, so thank you very much and have a good Thanksgiving, and we will see you
We
soon.
will see you in a week.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.